Hello, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of the Fix My Fees podcast, where merchant services is so boring, I bring on interesting experts and pick their brain about their business so that you guys can learn something new. I'm your host, Tavius Washington, and today we have with us, I've been trying to move, a little bit more into understanding leadership because I've been seeing a lot of the stats and things is like the decline of leadership and productivity. And this person has like 30 years or over 30 years in not only corporate leadership, but executive coaching and mental health. So I thought that kind of blend would be really, really good for helping people, especially in like the high stakes environment of building a business, CEOs, and helping eliminate that burnout and having more structural communication throughout the system. And so this person we're bringing on has a wealth of knowledge in that. So everyone, welcome to the stage, Eldon Solomon. How you doing today, Eldon?
Hey, I'm doing great. Thanks so much for having me.
So when we think about what you're doing here at, I think it was called Bridge the Gap Consulting, right? And I like the name because whether it's our identity, whether it's the business, whether it's the culture, there's a lot of things that we do have to kind of bridge the gap that people just kind of force out there. But when you thought, when you're at that bridge the gap, what does that mean to you? Or what does bridge the gap mean for you?
So there's these dynamics that we work with all the time, whether we know it or not. They're transactional dynamics of expectations and what we have to accomplish in our daily life. And then there's the transformational dynamics that really move the expectations to the outcomes that we want.
Right.
Those two dynamics speak to different different outcomes. Transactional dynamics debate what's right or wrong, good and bad, and transformational dynamics address how to make it work. We explore how to make what's not working work. Also, in the academic world and business world, in the real life flow, there's this dynamic flow that comes out in terms of best practice operating systems, and then there's the mechanical output, right? And we don't always we treat those as individual issues or on platforms, or better yet, we assume because we establish a good operating system, it's going to translate into a good outcome. And dynamic flow and mechanical outcomes needs a bridge that kind of helps you translate what is right, wrong, good, and bad to how to make it work. And how to make it work is mechanical. We don't think about that bridge. We just assume because we have the good operating system and we have the good protocols, that's going to translate automatically into mechanical outflow that we want.
Right. And when you're saying like the OS, are you mean like the human OS, or do you mean like actual softwares that people are using in their business?
Yeah, I think that you can apply that to both. Now, as a business coach, I talk about operating systems as in the context of business. And what's interesting is that we put a lot of money into establishing strong, powerful operating systems and strategic plans. But recent articles and recent research coming out of Harvard Business Review and others show that upwards into 67% of all strategic plans fail at the execution level. Some will say as high as 90, right? 67 to 90% of all strategic plans fail at the mechanical execution level.
That makes sense.
And so that starts internally, right? It starts with how to make good decisions. And how do you know that your decisions that you're making at a very internal, macro, then to micro level, external level is going to hit the mark. And so, what does your operating system look like internally? And how does that translate then into an outcome of an organizational operating system? But then what is the bridge you need to build in order to translate that operating system into mechanical outcomes that is going to produce the outcomes and the flow of information or change that you want to make?
Got it. That makes sense. There's the thought that like a lot of people love the idea, the creativity, the thought, but when it comes to executing, we kind of get lost. I do that a lot too, where,
Yeah.
right when it comes time to execute, the ADHD goes, well, just double check this one thing on YouTube. And now I'm doom scrolling, right? And it's like, if I would have just executed versus having that extra one thought, I would have probably been further along. But from like your standpoint, how did you even get into deciding that? Because I did see that, even mental health was a part of like your history.
Yeah.
What was it that made like leadership become the thing you wanted to be known for, a part of?
Yeah. So I was trained and still am trained as a marriage and family therapist. I went through grad school, spent a lot of money getting my education, got my first job, getting ready to graduate, and got my first job in a couple of weeks before I left the university. This thought process is, how do I know? How do I make good decisions?
Right.
Started to kind of ring through my head. I'm getting ready to go into the business, into the professional world, and my decisions matter. They make a difference. They impact life. And I sat down with one of my professors that I just love, an amazing individual. And I said to him, I said, Dave, tell me your secret. He looked at me, he said, what? And I said, how do you know that what you're doing is making a difference? And he looked at me and says, well, isn't that what we're all trying to figure out, Eldon? And I sat back and said, what? What the hell are you talking about? Like, we've been together for 3 years and getting ready to leave. And now you're telling me that, I think I told him this is all about guessing. We don't know. And he looked at me as a mentor should and just calmed me down and said, listen, you'll figure it out. Stay close to research, develop your art of therapy, and you're going to be just fine. Because that's really what I was worried about. Am I going to be okay? Right?
Right.
That was what I was thinking about at that point. Am I going to be okay? Am I going to do the right job? And then I got out into the work field. And 9 months after that, out of grad school, I found myself on the witness stand. This is where the rubber really hits the road. And I'm testifying against a client that I've been working with for 9 months as she lost her parental rights. Mm-hmm. Now, she should have lost her parental rights. She was an unsafe mother. But that same question, did I make all the right decisions along the way to put her in a place that she could win? It's that same decision that business leaders make all the time. Am I making all the right decisions along the way so that this strategic plan is going to hit? And I couldn't answer that question. And as a matter of fact, when I went back to my supervisors at the time, and despite my best practice and how good I was and what I was doing and my supervision, nobody could answer that question for me. The only answer they had to me is that Eldon, she was too resistant. She was not ready for change. There's nothing you could have done. And at that point, I just like, if I'm going to stay in this field with any degree of sustainability, I've got to do something different. Right. Because all the clients I'm working with are resistant. And if resistance was an indicator of non-readiness, then what the hell am I doing? Nobody I'm working with is ready for change. And what am I doing?
Right.
Right. And so, I found that same struggle when I got into the corporate world as well. I'm dealing with resistance. Everybody except my top tier, right? You break down to a third, right? The top third, all my management team, they're kind of right on board. We're just right there. But then when I get down to the middle and bottom third, resistance is pretty high. And so, but the success of my decision isn't in my hands. It's in the resistance down line.
Yeah.
Make sense?
Right.
This is why 67% or more of all strategic plans fails, because the execution level is not at that high decision level. It's at the bottom level where the rubber hits the road. And so as a therapist, I'm the same way. It's like I have good models and techniques and best practices and all those things that are guiding me. But the reality is sitting right in front of me is a client who is highly resistant, and my success depends upon them.
Right.
Right?
Right.
Now, how is that different in the business world, right? You found? So what I began to realize is that decision making is a leadership skill. And if I'm going to engage change at the level that my clients are expecting me to create, I have to do something different with resistance. So that's how I got there, and I began to to engage resistance differently, not as a negative, but a positive. And instead of trying to contain resistance or manage resistance or influence around resistance, I began to learn how to harness resistance. I realized that resistance is a fuel for change. Matter of fact, instead of resistance, I'll tell you, I get laughed at a lot, but I'm not wrong. Resistance is not an indicator of unreadiness. Resistance is an indicator of readiness. The more ready the more resistant somebody is in your relationship, the more ready they are to change. The problem is that you don't know how to harness that resistance, and you'll never get that fuel where you need to be. But the higher the resistance, the more ready they are to change. Lower resistance, they're not invested.
Okay. I was going to ask you, I was like, well, why do you think that is, or what makes you feel that way? But I'm guessing from what you're saying from this, if you aren't ready, you're not even really entertaining it enough, right? It's just like one day I'll get there. So you're not going to have resistance because you don't even think it's possible. But once it's there, like, oh, I can do it. Now you have to find ways to not do it. Is that what you're saying?
Well, yeah. So we're not going to engage change without resistance. We're going to push back. So, and a really fun analogy or example I give, if I'm a venture capitalist and I come to you to invest in a project, and I know that you have $300 million, I just want 30 million. That's not a hard push for you. And I tell you this project, I want you to invest. Are you going to just say, yeah, Eldon, and write me a check? No, you're not. Even if you like the project, you're not going to do it. A matter of fact, if you don't like the project, what are you going to say? No.
Yeah. It's not
there is no resistance.
Right.
It just stops flat, right?
Yeah.
But if you're interested, you're going to push back.
Right.
And you're going to push back. And you're going to ask questions. Now, what you're going to ask questions about is not the project, because obviously you like the project. What you're invested in, what you're interested in is Eldon going to protect my investment the way I want him to protect it? Resistance is about protection, not about defiance. We resist because to engage in change is going to challenge and impact what I value most about our relationship, about my life. It's going to change it. And before I invest and write that check, you better tell me, you better ensure for me that you're going to invest my values and my interest just like I would protect my own interests. When I realized that as a clinician, everything began to change.
Yeah.
I began to realize all I had to do was to convince my client that I'm going to protect what they're protecting, maybe a little bit differently and more healthily, but what they're protecting matters to me. Right. And when I can convince them that I'm going to protect that value and those patterns and decisions, or whatever that is, their resistance was now engaged. Doesn't really go down; it just becomes engaged, and they get really invested in that change. But Right. It doesn't come because you have no resistance. Resistance will tell you the path.
Yeah, I didn't think of it until you said it, and as you were describing, I'm like, you know what? I used to sell cars. This is over a decade ago. I used to sell cars. And there were two types of people who had no resistance. And it was the ones who knew they couldn't buy a car because they had no credit, no money, no do it. And the people who came in with the exact make, model, price they wanted, and they'll walk away right there. There was no resistance for them. But the people I sold the most to were the people who came, I don't want to talk to nobody. Don't talk to me. Don't ask me questions. Don't do nothing. Those are the people I ended up selling the most because they had the most resistance, but everybody else didn't want to deal with them. But I didn't mind it. I'd walk around with them, even if they don't say anything. I'm just here. And it's funny that you say it. I just never put that together in a way that, like, resistance means you want something to change, but you're.
Yeah. And it's not because you're not ready. It's
right.
Because you are.
Exactly.
That's why you're resistant. It's that you're not protecting my investment yet. And I'm not going to sell anything to you or buy anything from you until you do. It's interesting that you talk about being a car salesman and working in sales. When I help almost 100%, when I help salesmen and women understand how to harness resistance in a matter of weeks, if not a month or two, their sales goes up 25%.
So when you say harness, though, what do you mean by harness the resistance? Because I'll tell you right now, I'm facing that with this platform, with content creation. There is a punch of resistance to posting all the time. Imposter syndrome. There's so much. And I feel what you're saying. Like, obviously I must be ready for the change, but it's still not like going. So when you say the word like harness the resistance to, work in your favor, what do you mean by that?
So every buyer has an avatar, right? Avatar is a great word. That avatar represents what they value and how that value relates to pattern and decision making and those kind of things, and how they use resistance to manage what they value and their decision making. And so when I talk about harnessing it, I want to know what they value. I ask what I call value-based questions. So they say, I don't want to buy a car. Okay, cool. So what brought you here today? What motivated you to get out in the car, come here and come to this dealership at this moment? I want to understand that decision. Does that make sense?
Yeah, right.
I want to understand the value behind that decision. And whatever answer they give me will determine my next question. Because it's value-based. Decisions are always value-based. It's not transactional. It's not about right or wrong. It's about, is this going to work? And so when you sold cars, it wasn't because it was the right decision. As a salesman, you help them figure out how to make it work. And how to make it work is about understanding what they're protecting. What is it that you're protecting? I want to know that. Will you share that with me? Because if you share that with you, I think I can give you some things to think about.
Yeah. Right.
Do I need to be, do I need that? Is that example clear enough, or do you still have more questions?
No, I get the example because what you're saying is like, a lot of times people are ready to talk about the outcome, buying the car, buying my program, getting, doing Facebook ads instead of why that is there. Right. And for the person buying the car, it may be, I just wanted to see if this was sturdy enough to protect my kids. Right. It could be, someone who's on a sales call who's saying, I want to know that if I invest and do everything on my end, that you're going to hold up your end of the bargain. And so there's a lot of that protection of when the change happens, am I going to be okay, that you have to bridge the gap and comfort them in before making a decision.
Correct. So that's that bridge. Once you know, I just want to make sure you're going to protect my investment, then I stop talking about the car and I stop talking about the fuel mileage and I stop talking about all that stuff and I start talking about how I'm going to protect their investment.
Right.
Okay. You follow me? If it's about, I want to make sure that this car is going to protect my family, that's where I'm going to go. And that's the harness piece.
Yeah.
Okay. And you're not going to harness it and you're not going to be able to harness it unless you learn how to ask value-based questions that bring out what that is. So first of all, resistance is positive, not negative. If you think it's negative, then that's the path you're going to go down and you'll never harness that resistance. Right. So you've got to first stop and realize that resistance is positive. It's a good sign. Matter of fact, as a decision maker, you want resistance.
Right.
Because then you can then go down that path and start asking questions. Tell me about it. And then start harnessing it. And harnessing it is using it in your decision-making process of what path you're going to go. So, for example, millions of dollars every year, every day maybe, is spent in consulting and helping CXOs or business leaders establish a real strong operating system, a strategic plan. And they develop that operating system on a platform. And then when it's all said and done, they think about then how do we implement this down line? That's half-assed backwards, folks. I'm telling you right now, half-assed backwards. What you need to do first is understand the resistance that your organization is going to have to whatever strategic plan that you offer. And you harness that resistance into your operating system.
Right. Got it. Okay.
So when your strategic plan is ready to launch, it fits in within the human system interface already established. It's not going to be pushed back as hard because it is the resistance of your organization to whatever you do is already harnessed and integrated into the strategic plan.
Right. But Does that conflict with a person's identity when that starts to happen?
What do you mean?
Like, if they feel like, that they're a certain way and they identify as something, but the change needs them to identify as someone else. Like, okay, maybe I like being a one person band, but where they want to grow to, they need to hire on more people, but they're like, nah, I've always been a one person thing, in their identity of where I want to go versus who I am now conflict.
I think it can conflict. But again, if you have people who are highly resistant in your organization, but they're there and they're showing up to the table,
Right.
That tells you a story, right? I remember I walked in as a director to an outpatient clinic. One of my first corporations I worked in. This was actually a fairly small clinic, only had 9 providers, had the capacity and space to have 20. They're in a community or a market that should have had well over 20 providers. But for the last 15 years, they couldn't retain more than 9 and lost money every year. Within 2 years time span, I went in and I started to harness the resistance of my staff. I didn't push and challenge corporation management. Their expectations didn't change. I simply started to understand, what are you trying to protect? Okay, I can get that. Well, what if we try to protect it this way or this way? Because this is important for management. This is the expectations. And within 2 years of taking individuals that were highly resistant, highly distrusting of upper management, I increased the staff to 19. And in the second year, produced $250,000 of revenue above budget. Now, what's interesting about that, the clinical staff still didn't trust management. Management didn't change their expectations. Their operating system didn't change whatsoever. But
Right.
within the resistance of both sides, all I had to do by harnessing resistance is bridge the gap. If I can bridge the gap between their resistance and their resistance, then all of a sudden we have an outcome of over $250,000 above budget.
So how do you do that now when you're working with people? Is it a longer version? Is it systematic? How do you work with people now?
So I work with individuals and corporations the same, but very different. So the first thing I want to do when I work with a business leader is I want them to understand their own functional use of resistance. And I help them bridge what I call 5 functional gaps of resistance. And those gaps identify how they view resistance, positive versus negative. What are their internal sabotages that are impacting that they aren't aware of? What kind of evidence do they use in their decision, or is it emotional based, and how the evidence, the actual objective, measurable evidence, and the emotional statements, how they interact? What kind of dynamics are they dealing with within relationships, and how they navigate between transactional and transformational dynamics, and are they aware of what those dynamics are and how they function in relationships and decision, and the power of empathy and using empathy in their decision making. I do that on an individual basis before I take the leader on an external journey and have them help their organization do the same thing. So a business leader needs to understand they are dealing with what I call 5 functional gaps of resistance. And if they don't bridge those gaps, their decisions are all guesswork. But once you bridge those gaps, those five functional gaps of decision making, of resistance, you bridge those 5 gaps, then you can predict outcomes with pretty good certainty.
I like that. When it comes to either resistance or decision making, what do you feel like most people get wrong? Like when it comes to the thought processes behind it?
I just feel like I just keep standing on this platform of resistance. They get wrong. What they get wrong the most is that resistance is gold. It's not kryptonite. Resistance will tell them what path for success they need to go. So where they get it wrong is that they look at resistance and they walk away from it. They ignore it. They try to harness it, contain it, overcome it. That's a horrible mistake. I know it's a very common, it's conventional in nature, but that's where they're making their biggest mistake, is that they're seeing resistance as a negative.
What if
And
someone feels like they could combat the resistance with AI? You know what I mean? With AI, sometimes people are running into walls of resistance in what they're thinking of doing, and things like that. And they're just like, you know what? I'm just going to create an agent that does that for me. And that kind of takes the burden off their back.
yeah, fair point. And I think that the second mistake that they make is that they assume their transactional flow of information expectation is going to translate automatically into mechanical outcomes. You have to bridge the gap.
Right.
So back to your question about AI, resistance is not transactional. Resistance is transformational. AI doesn't deal with transformational outcomes.
Right. It can't.
You can't debate and argue resistance. You have to harness it and explore how to use that fuel into your decision making. Are you a father by chance?
No, but I have 13 nieces and nephews.
Many of your viewers are, and many of them are parents, right? Our mothers as well. If I have, and I'm a grandpa, so my kids have been long past this stage, but when my kids were little, 5, 6, 7, 8 years old, and they're lying to me, or they're being deceitful, or they're just being oppositional, it's not because they're bad kids. They're being defiant because they're protecting what they want to keep doing, right? They don't want to stop doing what they're doing. So if I say, hey, what are you doing? Nothing wrong, or did you hit your brother? No, didn't hit my brother. That it's because they're trying to protect, not get in trouble, or whatever that is. Okay. And so as parents, we understand that intuitively. We don't think about it consciously. We don't define that child as a negative. We don't define that person as lazy, that child is lazy or disrespectful. We just define them as just where they're at. And I want to integrate, I want to be able to meet them where they're at. And resistance is the same way. We need to treat resistance with the same transformational outflow. I want to meet you where you're at. How do I put my operating system into a human system interface that's already established? Not how do I bring my human system interface into an operating system that I spent thousands and tens of thousands of dollars to create. So it's that we have to look at resistance differently, and we have to bridge the gap between what's transactional and what's transformational. You spend many, many hours engaging in developing an operating system, a strategic plan that's very transactional, but it's not going to work unless it becomes transformational down the execution line of your employees. And we miss that.
I'm liking that. I'm loving the 2 points. I know I had so many other things I wanted to ask you about, but it's been such fun and enlightening to talk about the resistance side and the decision-making side, because there's so much of that. And I see so much of that, just naturally, right? I know I'm in merchant services, but when people give me their statements and I try to help them with like their time saving, a lot of times, that resistance starts to come in, imposter syndrome, and making a decision becomes overwhelming sometimes. So I'm glad we got to hone in on that. But
decision making becomes a guessing game. Let's just be really honest. It becomes a guessing game. And when you're putting thousands and millions of dollars on the line and a guess, that's a problem.
Yeah.
But if I can teach you how to bridge 5 functional gaps of resistance and then tell you bridge those gaps, you won't be guessing anymore. Would you believe me? Probably not. But I'm telling you, that's how it works.
Right.
Or that's how it can work.
Yeah. And then being able to have 5 stages knows you're going through a progression. This is not something that's about to happen instantaneously, but you can build upon that through time. And then I like the fact, there is a lot, especially when you talk about like the resistance will tell you the path. A lot of times the decision making is guessing because they want to take the path of least resistance, which usually isn't the path they end up wanting to take.
You will make more money and have higher production if you take the path of resistance.
Whew, it's one of those tough pills to swallow, but everything you said makes so much sense. right? Right. Trying to take the easy way out usually never really works out.
It's interesting. I'll be in a virtual setting like this or in a room, and I'll look at somebody and say, listen, resistance indicates readiness. And the person on the other side will like, you're full of shit. I'm going, no, I get it. I get it, because that's what conventional wisdom has told you for the last how many decades. But I'm telling you, my 34 years of experience has taught me something drastically different. And I'm very aware of the fact, the kind of resistance I'm getting from this conversation from your listeners. I totally understand, right? It's taken me 34 years to get to where I'm at. But once I understood the value and power of resistance and how to harness it, my productivity and my decision making went up exponentially.
Wow. That's crazy. It does make you sit back and think, right? It really does kind of make you want to sit back and go, wow, like where could I be if I stopped taking the easy? And maybe sometimes it's not even the easiest. You may just take an easier route, right?
No, yeah. And think about this. If, there's this old saying, if you always do what you always done, you always get what you always got. Folks, if our strategic plans are failing at a 67 to 90% level, we have got to stop doing the same things over again. And you can't tell me that that's the easier path if the outcome is failure. It's kind of like my clients will come into me and say, well, I'm doing just fine. Well, then, okay, then why are you here?
Right. Why are you on this call?
Why are we here? I don't need to change. Then why are we here? Why are you an addict? Why is he having this problem? If you're doing really well,
right,
then why are we here? So we have to look at that overall statistics of 67 to 90% and say, it's not working. So why do we keep trying to shove a square peg in a round hole expecting a different outcome?
Right. So you have to change it up. And one thing, I think that's like when you think about the execution part, right? We were talking about like full circle back in the beginning, we were saying that 90% of things fail. Well, it's 67%, but some studies show 90% can fail at the execution. And it's because the execution is where the most resistance is. When you finally have to do the thing, that's where the most resistance is. So that makes sense why those statistics say that way. Now that we're talking about everything, but it also goes back to like every person that we know of that has massive success always has a story of that resistance, right? I didn't think about it till now, but I don't care who it is that's millions, multi-millions, even Powerball hitters. They lose them because they take the path of no resistance right after they get the money and just kind of throw it. So, man, you got to be thinking. My mind's kind of racing right now. I appreciate the conversation. It's been a lot of fun, but I want to make sure that people can get in touch with you if they want to know more, especially if it's individuals or even organizations that are facing those types of things. If they want to know more information, who do you work with and how can they get in touch with you?
I love working with business leaders at all levels of leadership. The reality is, if I'm really honest, I like working with parents too. And I like working with husbands and wives and others, the daughters and brothers, because decision making is a skill, whether you are in a CEO of a large corporation or you're a mother or father trying to manage some difficult dynamics within your family. My BTG consulting really does though focus a lot on that business leadership. And if you're a leader, if you're being challenged in how effective your decisions need to be, working with a coach that can help you manage difficult relationships and how to turn your most challenging relationship into your most reliable asset, that's where I come into play. I'm not a good coach that works with developing operating systems or strategic plans, but I am a good coach to help you integrate the resistance and the human system interface of your organization into those plans. I'm not here to replace any of those coaches. I'm here to enhance what I'm here to be that bridge that bridges the gap that's already there, and you don't really realize it's there. If you don't believe it's not there, that gap's not there, just please remember 67% of all strategic plans fail at the execution level. That's the gap. Yeah. 67% is a huge number. That's a huge number. So that's who I work with. for this setting in terms of conversation, how to get a hold of me, I think it's really easy. Give me a call. 765-546-1085. If you think I'm full of crap, give me a call. That's who I really want to talk to.
Yeah.
Not because I want to debate with you or argue with you, but it's because you're resisting it. And that's wonderful. I want to hear the resistance. And I think that would be a great conversation to have. And so in that context, also LinkedIn's a great way to get a hold of me. And maybe I can send you my website so you can post it on the website. But
Yeah.
If you have my number, give me a call.
Yeah, I'll add your phone number, your LinkedIn and your website to the YouTube bio so that people can reach out to you. But Eldon, man, I want to thank you so much. Before we go, man, tell us a little bit about what you do outside of when you're not helping people break through that resistance and having these thought-provoking processes that I have to have in my mind after we hop off this podcast. Now, what do you like to do in your own spare time? What's fulfilling for you?
Well, first of all, I'm a husband of 40 years. My wife and I have four boys and 3 amazing daughter-in-laws and 3 grandkids. And
That's awesome.
Much of my outside of work focus is around them and who they are and the relationships that I have with them. I love the outdoors. I love to be outdoors, outside as much as possible. And I love to have my family around with me when I'm outside. But my wife is my best friend and I'm her best friend. And so we don't do a lot of things alone. We do it together. So it's just a very, very passionate part of my life is my wife, my family, and my grandkids.
Awesome. Yeah, you can tell. You exude the care, right? You take the care from that you have your family and you do it with your clients. You genuinely care about their outcomes, which is why you have the hard conversations with them that they need to have. So that's a testament to the 40 years of being a husband and 4 kids as being a father. That's awesome, man. I appreciate it. But thank you so much for coming on. I got a lot to think about myself, man. You have really, really changed my thought process, but it all makes sense. In every instance that I can think of from every part of my sales journey to now, I can feel what you mean by the resistance. So it's a lot to ponder over and think about. So thank you for coming on here today and getting all of our minds thinking and rumbling in our head.
Awesome. I hope just that one concept of seeing resistance as a positive and not a negative will change the trajectory of your life.
Yeah. And if there's at least, if I can help at least one person, it's a win. Well, I'm one right now that's already thinking about that. So I appreciate that. Thank you so much again, Eldon, for coming on.
You bet. It's been a pleasure. Thank you so much for having me.
All right. And thank you guys for listening. I appreciate you tuning in. If you have questions, if you're facing that resistance, if you think that he's full of shit, reach out to him. He said it. Call him. Have the conversation. But if you're going to make that effort, just have an open mind to have a real conversation with him, right? And be there. That's all I ask. And even if you yourself have a business where you feel like you're doing amazing things like Eldon, and maybe you want to be on my podcast, then you can reach out to me at Tavius@FixMyFeesTeam.com. Thank you so much for listening to another episode of the Fix My Fees podcast. Thank you and good night.